Before I go into the topic, I just want to quickly tell you about who's Datalicious. This is how we sell ourselves. That's the story that we usually tell. We use data at Datalicious to help marketers fatten their funnel or widen their funnel, push more people into the funnel and push more people through so that they actually buy. And we do a lot of work at the top of the funnel. If you're in marketing and you have a budget and you're trying to figure out how to split this budget across the various different activities that you have available, channels, devices, campaigns, you ask yourself, where to put my money? Where am I going to get the best return on investment for it? And so we do a lot of work at the top of the funnel using something called media mix modeling. And we use things like random forest, we use things like hidden Markov models. So there's some of the cool words that you need to hear. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about that. I want to actually tell you a story about how important it is, increasingly important it is for analysts to understand the technology that generates the data that you're looking at. Because if you don't understand the technology behind it and the limitations that come with that, it is very, very dangerous to then analyze the data and draw conclusions from that, because you're potentially making massive mistakes. Okay? And so the problem that we face in attribution is this. People, I threw the cartoon in there this morning, but apparently it works quite well with this audience, so fantastic. The problem that we face is that people get exposed to a lot of different types of advertising before they make a decision, before they're ready to hand over their money. We see, we get a mail piece, we see outdoor advertising, and finally, the last step that we take is we buy on the mobile phone, because right now we're bored, we're sitting on the bus, and this is what is available to us right now. And then what tends to happen in marketing, because of technology limitations, we give all the credit to what we call this very last touch point, the last interaction that happened before the sale. And we go like, wow, mobile is the most important thing. Bam, we're going to put all our budget into mobile. And that's obviously very dangerous. So what I want to talk to you about today is ways and mechanics to actually make sure that we capture every single one of these touch points, and we make sure that every single one of these touch points gets some form of credit for the final sale. Okay? And hopefully that's of value to all of your organizations. So quickly, just a little bit of a recap on what's happening in India, and it's probably more for my benefit than yours. So India, obviously, lots of people here, over 1 billion, many mobile users. Yeah, most people actually only access the internet over their mobile device. So mobile first, mobile applications, much more important here than normal websites are. A lot of people use social media. Maybe that's the only thing or the majority of the interaction time that they have on their mobile device. So a lot of videos being viewed. A lot of people spend time on apps like Facebook and WhatsApp. So we already have a combination of a whole bunch of different things going on where people spend their time. They use their mobile phone. They potentially spend it in Google Maps to find a shop. They look up the product on the browser. They do mobile search. They use their mobile app. They see ads in there. They potentially buy directly on the mobile app. So a whole bunch of different types of interactions going on before a sale happens. And now we have technology companies like Apple and Google that basically control these environments, or Facebook. And they decide what you can track and what you can't. And so here's a big news that came out this week, today I think, or yesterday. And so iOS, Apple has decided that with version 11, they will get rid of cookies, or make it a lot harder for you to track people using cookies. And that's a huge deal, okay? And so how many people in the room here actually understand what a cookie is and what it does? Okay, all right, there's actually quite a few hands. Fantastic, good. I was worried that nobody is actually interested in this topic. And so it's really important that you understand these technology limitations, because there's a significant impact with these cookies disappearing. And it's just going to change all of the reports that you're looking at. Yeah? So, how to solve this? Okay. Now, what I want to tell you about today is what happens if the cookie disappears? What happens if you use a different type of measurement approach for measuring all the different touch points that are involved. How do the results change? So you get a little bit of an idea for what potentially the impact of this problem is, and when you solve it, how potentially your results change. So we did a huge study on this in Australia. Apologies, this is not Indian data, so you're going to have to put the Indian filter over that a little bit, the Indian reality check. But I think there's still a lot of results in there that you can apply to your market and take some learnings away from. So we did this across 3 different companies, a big insurance company, a pay TV company, and a telco company. And we collected over 1 billion data points. And so it's a lot of data, big study, pretty unique in that regard. And what we did, what we found is that one person tends to have multiple identities online, which we call cookies. So, for example, you use let's say you have 2 mobile devices, one from your company and one personal one. So you have a cookie on your mobile device from work, and you're going to have a cookie on the private mobile device. And then maybe you're also using a particular mobile app. You're going to have one cookie in the browser, and you're going to have another cookie in the mobile app. Okay, so you have 3 different identities. And you look like you're 3 different people, but you're actually the same person. You're the same person with 3 different identities online. And each identity has a series of touch points leading up to a sale. And most companies, most reports look at these people in isolation. You think only one particular identity was involved in buying something, but it was really all 3. So it looks a little bit like this. In the cookie world, you have a different identity across different types of browsers, devices. There's a different identity in the app, outside the app, and you look at all of those in isolation, you only have a certain amount and you're missing some touch points. So what happens if you go from the cookie world, where you have a lot of different separate identities, to what we call the people world, where we track in an actual person? I know that is a person that uses 2 different phones and uses various different apps within that phone. What happens to the results if you make that change to the way you treat marketing measurement? That's what today's session is really all about. Okay? Now the first thing that we noticed when we did this is that paths, we call them paths, like a series of touch points leading up to a sale. We call that a path to purchase, a purchase path. Now these paths get a lot longer. If you're able to take these different identities and merge them together into one person, these paths get a lot longer. They almost double, times 1.8. Now let's think about what that means for your analysis. If you think that a person, a customer, only had 2 touch points with you before they bought something, and in reality it's actually 4, surely that must impact your results in the end when you try to figure out which one of those touch points had the most impact in driving sales. Yeah. And the way this represents itself in the Australian study is basically in cookie-based measurement. People look at desktop computers and mobile devices separately because they're both a separate identity. They have separate cookies. And so people think that these 2 things don't work together. They just think 70% of paths happen on the desktop computer, and then 29% of people, 30% of people only use the mobile phone. Because they think they're separate people, they can't tie them together. Once they tie these people together across devices, they realize that actually these things don't happen in isolation. It's both of these channels combined, desktop and mobile together. And I know that desktop is not so important in India, but what would be happening in this market is probably the mobile browser combined with the mobile app, combined with the browser on another device. All these things together actually create the final output, not in isolation. And the results change quite drastically. Yeah? You can see here a drop from 70 to 48%. That makes a huge impact when you look at the final results. So based on cookie-based measurement, you think maybe that 29% of conversions come from mobile, but in reality it's actually 52. Yeah? That's a huge change. The other aspect that we discovered is the paths get 40% longer. Okay, so there's actually much more interaction happening than we actually think. And so the way this represents itself, and I think this is what attribution is all about, we're basically trying to figure out what type of different channels are people interacting with before they purchase something. If we look at the cookie-based world on the left-hand side, where all of the credit for a final sale goes to the last touch point, so we call that cookie-based last-click attribution. All credit for a sale goes to the very last touch point. We think that the majority of credit should go to channels like paid search and direct organic, okay? This is the same data. It's just a different way of looking at the data when you change the measurement approach, okay? Now, when we go from cookie-based tracking to something called custom attribution, where we give credit to every single channel that was involved, but it's still cookie-based as an underlying measurement technology, we suddenly see a massive increase in display impressions, because I can now add credit to display impressions as well, not just to clicks. So you can see that already changes the picture massively. Suddenly you think, oh, okay, display is not just 9%, it's actually 47% of the credit in terms of driving sales. But social is still something I can't track so well, like Facebook, because it happens in an app. I can't usually track it with cookies. Now, once I move on to what we call people-based attribution across devices, in a custom attribution world where I'm giving credit to every single touch point is involved, I'm again changing the picture significantly. And suddenly, I have to give, instead of 7%, more like 17% credit to Facebook and Instagram. Again, a huge change. And basically what you're looking at here is the kind of measurement evolution that happened in marketing attribution over the last sort of 5 years, actually last 10. The thing that was around forever was the last click-based piece. Then we moved on to custom attribution, maybe over the last 5 years. And the people-based attribution is sort of a topic that really has only come up over the last year or two. It's a fairly new approach, and it hasn't been quite cracked yet. There's a lot of questions still around that, but it's a topic that you as marketers, as analysts, who mostly deal with marketing analytics, I guess, have to really get involved in and find ways and solutions to do for yourself, because it really, really changes the results. So in a cookie-based measurement approach, we think people only have 16 touch points, but in reality it's actually 22. And you can imagine like that difference really changes the picture in terms of what works, what type of marketing channels work for your company, and which one don't. Now, once you put that all together, and I have to apologize for the Facebook example, but this is a study that was actually paid for by Facebook. They didn't get to change the results, but they did pay us to run the study, and they made the data available to us. So the example here is from Facebook. But once you implement this more accurate type of attribution, what we found is that the change for one particular channel, in this case the example is Facebook, the change in results, as in how effective is that particular channel, Facebook, was 240%. So you thought, that, let's say, Facebook should credit for $1. But in reality, once you change your measurement approach and you fix some of the underlying data issues, actually the credit that the channel should get was more like $2.40. That changes the picture massively. And so you can kind of hopefully get an idea for how important that may potentially be in your organization if you're involved in marketing optimization, channel optimization, and where your company spends its money. Potentially, channels like Facebook should get way more credit and also should get way more budget, but they're not getting that because you simply have a measurement challenge. You really need to understand the underlying technology and where the data is collected to make sure that the results that you're presenting are not actually potentially significantly wrong, okay? So, and the reason behind these numbers basically is with cookie-based measurement, you think 7% of conversions are attributed to things like Facebook and Instagram, but in reality it's more like 17, so massive change, okay? Numbers move quite drastically when you fix the underlying data. Another thing that we noticed as well, and this is something that we do through our modeling approach. So we use something called HMM, hidden Markov models, and what these allow us to do in comparison to other approaches for marketing attribution, they allow us to figure out how one touch point influences the next. As in, I can't just look at the final result, the sale, and how all the touch points drove a final sale. I actually know how somebody moved through the funnel. Yeah? If a particular activity has moved someone from awareness to engagement, or from engagement to desire, yeah? I can look at the individual path of the funnel. And one of the interesting things we found is that Facebook is actually extremely good at moving people along the funnel. It's not so amazing in closing the final sale. Yeah? It's not a direct response mechanism where you just throw up a price and people go like, I want to buy that. They're not actually that great at that. So if you look at Facebook campaign results in a last click world, you never quite think the channel is that amazing. But it is actually really good at making people aware of a certain product and shifting them just that little bit closer to generating interest in the product and wanting to buy, generating desire to buy. So quick summary, if you fix these measurement challenges, if you move on from the cookie-based approach to more like a people-based approach, and you build a full purchase path, cross-device paths, and you find out that people use multiple different devices to actually purchase, you see that the paths get much, much longer. People have many more interactions with you as a brand and your advertising than you actually think, and that significantly changes the actual results. Up to 100, 200% for certain channels, simply because you previously couldn't provide accurate figures because you had a measurement challenge. Yeah? So it's really, really important that you measure and value every single touch point in what we call the purchase path. I only talked about advertising examples, but I think we're already seeing some clients moving on from that in terms of adding non-advertising touch points into this as well. So they're trying to figure out, did somebody walk into a store? Did they read a particular piece of content? Did they call my call center? Did they have a bad support experience? I think you need to try to include as many different types of touch point, not just advertising, in your measurement. You want to know how every piece of interaction influences somebody buying or repeat buying from your company. Because you may have an amazing advertising campaign, but potentially your price point is off, or the person had a really, really bad support experience, and then your campaign can be amazing and your price point can be amazing, but if they're never getting support, they're not going to buy. So we try to include as many different data types in this path as we can and try to give credit to every single touch point that we have. And the other thing we need to realize is that these touch points happen across multiple devices, multiple apps, multiple browsers. So one key challenge to solve for marketers today that collect this data is you need to find a way of tying these touch points together across apps, across browsers, across devices. We provide solutions like what we call our data exchange. We leverage Facebook data, cross-device Facebook data to help with that. But there's many other ways of doing that. You can do this in a deterministic fashion. There's probabilistic approaches. There's a lot of different ways of solving this. But you as marketers and analysts need to understand how that works. How can I tie data points together across previously disparate data sources? And it usually works by identifying common user identifiers across these different data sets and merging them together. And there's a lot of different ways of doing that. We just started looking into this, but it's a really, really exciting area. And if you're in marketing analytics and in marketing optimization, it's an area that you really, really need to know more about because it will drastically change your underlying data and the results that come out of that. And that's it for me. Any questions?
Sorry. So I'm quite in line with what you said. I think identifying a customer across different social channels, currently it is a challenge, but companies are opening up. One thing I can think of is the identity resolution mapping. Like you have a unique customer email ID, and then you can actually tie it across different social channels and see if it is the same customer who is talking about your product. Now, there's one point I wanted to know, and this is an open question to all of you, all of this audience as well. We talked about one of the touch points. I mean, we didn't talk about one of the touch points, but I think it's a very vital touch point where a customer will come onto the website, for example. Now, he has almost made up a mind to purchase a product, but he read some of those reviews which are written by other customers, and he dropped the path then and there itself. Now, I don't care whether it is a fake review or a genuine review, but that kind of unstructured content, I mean, there should be some way where, we can probably, use that particular touch point and, tie it back to backward or forward to see whether that customer is going to purchase or not. So I'm not sure if your company is doing it or if any other company is doing it, but
it's not impossible. Okay, I think the big fallacy that we're guilty of these days is we focus too much on the paid advertising and not enough on those, call them more qualitative influences. And the only thing you need is to, you don't need to always be exact about this. The only thing you need is a small sample of people. Maybe you don't have this in every single purchase path, but you create a small sample of people that you survey and you find out, have you seen a good review or a bad review? So there's a whole bunch of different ways of solving that particular problem, but it's a really good question, and it's a very honorable quest that you have. So I hope you keep going with it, because I personally think the impact is quite significant. Yeah, and most of the research suggests that people trust reviews, and they look at many reviews before they make a purchase decision. So if I were you, I would try to figure out how to do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Christian, thanks for bringing this customer identification problem to the forefront. Now, data exchange, it is not concrete yet. How do you think GDPR is going to affect the evolution of data exchange?
Sorry, which one is going to affect?
No, so you said the solution is being developed, data exchange, Facebook. So through that, you're going to come to it.
I think this is, the data exchange here is just, it's sort of like the brand name that we put on it, right? That's our service, that's our product. But really the only thing it is in the background is the ability to manage as many different user identifiers as there are and try to figure out the way to relate them together. And some of that is done in a deterministic fashion, as in somebody logs in with their email address, so I can tie the email to a cookie at the same time. Some of it is done probabilistically, same IP address being used at the same time in different, there's various different ways. But what we have to move on as marketers, I think, is the utter reliance of the third-party cookie. It is ludicrous, right? Just using one ID that's based on a technology like a cookie that Apple is now completely going to block, and all our measurement is based on that. We have total faith in that. That's not going to work anymore. We need the capability, whether you use something like data exchange or you build this yourself if you have smart guys, to figure out a way of collecting as many different user IDs as possible and figure out a way of relating them together. That's the only way of cracking this, I think, in long term. And some of these you can buy, like companies like TapAd and cross-device identification companies, and I think others you have to collect yourself, as in people actually logging into your platforms, into your tools on different devices, clicking on emails and type of stuff. Okay.
It was about the same. What is the latest?
Would you like me to keep you any longer from lunch? Oh no, there's another.
So one simple question on this. Like you mentioned a couple of examples. What are the technologies available to solve this specific problem that you were talking to him about?
There's a long list of them. They differ by country because it's mainly like an audience piece. Okay, so I can probably recite a few that are available in the US. None of these guys exist in India. Okay, so you have an amazing business opportunity to start cracking that in India, and you're going to make a ton of money if you solve that. Okay, but in the end, the only thing you need is a tracking methodology, like collecting the IDs, and a really big table like Redshift or Google BigQuery to relate them together, and a couple of smart analysts to build some models. It's really not rocket science. The only way to solve this is through scale. You need partners like big e-commerce companies, big publishers that have identification points, where people actually type in an address or a name and an email address, and they voluntarily identify themselves. That's where you go and get the data, and you need a big data set, and then you can start drawing some conclusions. So I urge you to start that business in India. You're probably going to make a lot of money out of it. You can give me a share.
Chris, I have a question. So a customer journey is not just about...
Where are you?
Here I am, sorry. So customer journey is not just about the online behavior, it's offline as well.
Yeah.
And I think this is the point which I didn't see in your presentation at all. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And there's different ways of solving that, but I don't know how technically I was supposed to go with this, but there's other presentations that we have that deal with this. And essentially, the way this is being approached is online, you can track everything, right? So online, online, this is what we do, and we basically, on an individual user level, we can see every single touch point, ad, click, page view, review that they've been exposed to. But obviously, TV and radio, we can't do that. It's impossible, right? Unless it is digital TV or something like that. And so basically, what you start off with is you have a deterministic approach to tracking the online journey, and then you get into the probabilistics to start injecting offline touch points into the digital path based on geodemographics, basically. So I have a digital path that is from a person that lives in a certain area, and I probably know in that area that people watch a certain TV show or and they see certain billboards, and then you use some fancy probabilistic statistics to figure out whether this person potentially has seen your ad or not, and you kind of like simulate how the digital path looks like with offline touch points. You sort of inject them in. But that's a pretty new space. like combining media mix modeling with media attribution. It's a bit like the Wild West right now. I haven't seen anything that's amazing, and we at Datalicious, we're still trying to figure out exactly how to do that as well.
Thank you.
No worries.
Hi, Chris.
Hey.
How much of this is a legal or a privacy policy concern for various countries, for the business that you're talking about?
Now, that's not really my problem, right? So I'm just the guy that provides the technology and the way of doing it, and then I go to the client and say, like, you need to make sure that your legal department has this approved, right? No, no, it's not quite like that. Look, it's a really, really good question, and I think the technology is there to track every move that we make. People are trying to create privacy rules around that, but it's probably pretty difficult to enforce that, and government tends to be like, what, 10 years behind the technology that's actually doing it. So the way we're dealing with this, if we make sure that all the data that we analyze is anonymous. I never know it's you. I just know that as an anonymous customer, and I take all these anonymous customers together, I aggregate them. I could identify you, but we're trying not to do that, and we de-identify all the personal identifiers, so email addresses are hashed and addresses are hashed. For us, they're all anonymous people, and we aggregate them, so we're looking at an aggregated result for certain customer segments. I think that's the only way of dealing with it, but it's a really good point, and I think we have a certain responsibility as marketers to make sure that privacy is not totally violated, because if that happens, then I think the consumer is going to lash out and they're going to demand legislation, and it's going to really, really hurt us. So I think it is a really good topic. It's not being talked about enough. Yeah. Oh.